this.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the STR podcast, otherwise known as the Start the Rebuild podcast. I'm your host, Tim Fournier, alongside co-host Ian Mills.
Hey guys, how you doing? Just a quick reminder to follow us on Instagram at start_the_rebuild or Start Rebuild Pod on Twitter. Also our private or rather our personal Instagram accounts at Tim Fournier or Tim.Fournier and Ian Mills 01. Next episode, we're considering doing kind of a mailbag Q&A type of show. So feel free to shoot us any questions either on our YouTube comments or just DM us on any of those accounts previously stated.
Yeah, for sure. And get new people watching the show. So for anyone new here, our general mission is to kind of bring a new aspect to sports talk and something different from what you see on ESPN, where you see Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp arguing about something that they don't even know about, and just talking about things that they think will shoot up ratings. And I think we bring a new aspect where we talk about what we see and what we think, and just bring an educated kind of take on sports, specifically or mostly football and basketball. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy.
Yeah,
and Ian will now talk about what we're going to get into today and in the future.
So basically, we're starting kind of a new segment, new series, almost where it's kind of like the All-STR, All-STR, whatever you want to call it, teams. Today, in particular, we are doing our All-STR childhood offense. So players from our offense. Players in our childhood who played offense, who growing up we kind of admired or looked up to, and or really just kind of like liked watching, whether it was or
for some of them it was for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, some
that
of them
just we liked for no reason.
Some of them it could just be names. Some of them it could just be fantasy football. Madden was a huge thing. We looked back Madden 12 player rating. So we're going depths of the internet to scavenge that. So without further ado, we'll start with quarterback. For this one, we kind of picked two guys because...
And just to start off, we wanted to mostly pick players who were retired because they were from like our earlier childhood when we first really started getting into football. Kind of bring back some nostalgia and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that being said, as I was just going to say, not all of the players are officially retired. They're at the end of their career maybe. And just like the first guy on our list, quarterback, played for about 8 different teams. Probably the greatest backup quarterback of all time. And did you know he went to Harvard? I heard.
I haven't heard that, actually.
I think he has the same amount of kids as Phillip Rivers as well. Ryan Fitzpatrick, obviously, for us,
the obvious choice.
Right, of course. I feel like everyone is like, if you were a fan of any of the teams he played for, you're kind of gonna love Ryan Fitzpatrick, even if he wasn't great. We're from upstate New York, big Bills guys, as I am, and he had a couple good years there. Didn't win many games, but they had a couple good years.
I mean, I don't think anyone really loved Ryan Fitzpatrick until like, what was it, like a year or two ago when he was amazing on the Bucks for like the first 3 weeks. But we had a deep love for this guy as a player. He was never the best, but he was just a great guy that you always rooted for. And then, he led the Bills to get slaughtered by the Patriots 2 times a year. But I don't know. He's just a guy you had to root for. And he wasn't the most talented, and he just wasn't the best. But he just he's close to our hearts. How about that?
In 4th grade, I used to brag that he had 23 touchdowns and 10 picks in the season. I thought that was actually pretty good. But they went like 4-12 that year. But I was like, that's insane. So our guy, we picked another guy who was actually retired, and probably the greatest undrafted player of all time. Could be an argument for Antonio Gates maybe, but Kurt Warner, Terrell Davis, Kurt Warner, obviously undrafted, goes to the Rams. But we remember more as a Cardinal, I would say, for sure. The one year where they went to the Super Bowl as a 9-7 wild card team. What else can you really say if you want to add anything, Tim?
That was probably the first Super Bowl that I watched where I was like really invested in football. and like really knew what was happening, I'd say. Because then, if I'm remembering correctly, it was Saints Colts the next year.
I think
Maybe
you're right. I think you're right. I think it was.
it was one of those 2 years.
It
Or
definitely. No, it was.
yeah, it was the Cardinals.
Packers
Okay.
Steelers happened. I think.
I'm pretty sure Cardinals Steelers was like the first Super Bowl where I like really was into it and caring. So obviously I was rooting for the Cardinals and a big huge part of that was that I loved Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald. So he is like the ultimate throwback quarterback for me in my mind in terms of players that I love. Another name that we talked about that isn't necessarily on this list, but we both really liked was actually Carson Palmer. For me, I didn't really like him until he was on the Cardinals, and that's kind of like on the edge of like our childhood. But I really liked him when he was on the Cardinals, and then when David Johnson started breaking out a couple years ago. So he's also a guy we started talking about.
Yeah, he was a guy that I remember watching Bills-Bengals games, and I'd be like, only if the Bills had Carson Palmer, they could win. You know, they wouldn't go 4-12; they go maybe 6-10.
Yeah.
But also, if you watch the old Hard Knocks episodes when they did it with the Bengals, Carson Palmer is very like nice. Like he's a funny guy as well. But
yeah.
That being said, we'll move on. We'll go to running backs next. Number one, probably, if not my favorite player of all time, like top.
He honestly, he's not a Raven, but he is very much in the conversation for my favorite player of all time.
So a number one running back is Fred Jackson. Played for the Bills for most of his career, then played a year with the Seahawks. So he went for Division III co-college. If you don't know, I'll just, for context, Division III co-college. Tim, do you know where he played next?
He played in NFL Euro.
Yes, he played Rheini. It's like the Rheini Fire was like the name of the team. Where I have no idea where that is, but he played in NFL Europe, and then came on. He was Marshawn Lynch's backup, then CJ Spill's backup, and he was basically better than both of them.
He was never really like a backup, though. He was always
in rotation.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the point is, eventually he did kind of get the feature role.
Yeah. He had 1 year, and I remember he had like 900, almost 1,000 yards through like 10 weeks or something, and then he like hurt his knee or something.
But yeah, also
which was very sad. But he was just the ultimate like blue collar, doesn't say much, has a good personality about everything, where he's just an automatic fan favorite. And it's really sad that I think he's kind of being forgotten now.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people listening to this probably don't know who Fred Jackson is.
That's a good point.
If you're not a Bills fan.
Right, exactly. He is probably the face of the Bills drought. If you had to pick a guy who like is the Bills drought, like the face of the drought, probably
not the reason for the drought, but he's like the face of like the fan base, like who they love.
Yeah, the 20
him time. Yeah.
Him or Kyle Williams is probably it. Next, a fantasy football juggernaut, Jamal Charles.
He's so good.
Played for Chiefs and Broncos. Very obviously incredible running back. I feel like most people obviously know who he is. Been retired only for a couple years.
He is at one point it might have gotten down with like at the end of his career with the Broncos, but he has like a ridiculous like 5.6 yards per carry, like absolutely ridiculous. He was also great in the receiving game, which was really fun to watch. He was just so good, and then also amazing in Madden, and then fantasy football, as you said. And I had him for like a year or two in fantasy when it was like I was very new to fantasy football, and he was just a beast. It's so much fun to watch.
I could be wrong, but he is the single leading scorer. If he's not one, he's two for fantasy points in a single game. So
I remember that. I think it was against like the Raiders.
Yeah, it was against the Raiders, and
I distinctly remember being really mad because I like wanted him to get to like 60 fantasy points, like something ridiculous. And he like had an open field play, and he was like easily going to beat the safety if you just kept going to the outside. And then he tried to cut it back and like tripped over the safety and fell down at like the 2-yard line. And I distinctly remember, like, I don't know, like 12-year-old me, like, yelling at Jamal Charles, and he ended up getting like 55 fantasy points.
I think he had 2 receiving touchdowns in the first quarter in that game. Could have. Next, another fantasy football guy, a guy who actually has admitted that he would pad his stats strictly for fantasy football, and that's Maurice Jones-Drew. Tiny, who replaced Fred Taylor, who is also a very good back in the 2000s. He, for a while, I mean, he was the Jags for like what feels
you
like.
Want to talk about face of a drought?
Yeah,
that's Maurice Jones-Drew right there. He's just absolutely built like a bowling ball. My love for him, honestly, mostly comes from Madden. He was really good in Madden, I remember. I'd always play mini games with him, and like it'd be like there's like no defensive linemen, and it's just like linebackers and a running back, and there's like just like blocking like sleds or whatever, and you just like run backwards like 60 yards, and you just like run in a circle until you could beat everyone down the field. I just have great memories with that. And then I don't know what it is, but whenever a running back is either really small or really big, I just, for some reason, love that running back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like Brandon Jacobs being gigantic. Just regardless of what he did, I was in love with him. But yeah, I know.
Right, yeah. Like Eddie Lacy. I loved Eddie Lacy. Like, he could be terrible, and I'd always be rooting for Eddie Lacy just because he was big. I don't know what it is.
No, I get that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Next, this guy thinks he could beat a wolf one-on-one. I don't know if you remember that from a couple of years. Arian Foster said
I do remember that.
He could beat a wolf one-on-one. So mostly known for his time at the Texans, a little bit with the Dolphins. I think he just played for those 2 teams. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he went to the Dolphins, and as soon as he left the Texans, his career died. But
yeah, I think he played maybe a year and like 3 games, I think, with the Dolphins.
He did play for the Browns in the movie Draft Day. He got drafted by them at least.
When he was like 30, I think.
Yeah.
He also undrafted, and he on draft day in the 6th round was called by the Seahawks. They're like, "Hey, do you want to be a Seattle Seahawk?" And he was like, "I'm good." And they didn't draft him, so he went undrafted. So there's that.
He's
an interesting character.
He was like one of those players that you can't really say what he's good at, but he's just like decent at everything. The only thing I'd say he's bad at was like long speed. I'm pretty sure he ran like a 4.7 at the combine, but like I don't know what it was. Every single time he got the ball, something good happened. Yeah. I remember like the big thing the announcers always talked about, at least watching him, was like, oh, he's so amazing at making one cut, and like that's perfect for the Texans offense, and he makes one really decisive move, and then he like is good in the open field or whatever. But like talking about him right now, I cannot tell you specifically like one thing that he's really good at. He was just like decent at everything, and he was a good player because of that.
Him and Andre Johnson were quite the offensive combo.
Matt Schaub at the helm. What a guy.
Yeah. Still in the league somehow. He's still trying
to Falcons, right?
Yeah, he threw for 400 yards in the game this year. Isn't that?
Did he actually?
Yeah, I mean, I think they lost, but yeah, he threw for.
Why do I not remember that?
It was
because he's Matt Schaub.
Yeah, it was like
he's the most forgettable player of all time.
Most pick sixes in the season.
I think. This is like completely off topic, but Matt Schaub was like a good NFL quarterback.
Yeah,
like he was back.
They went like 12-4 with him, right?
Yeah, like I don't know what it is now, but the like 35th best quarterback in the NFL now would be like a top 15 quarterback in like 2010.
Yeah,
like I don't know what it is, but there's just like a huge influx of NFL quarterbacks. But so Matt Schaub's like he used to be better, but when he was at his peak, he was actually like a good quarterback. And then all of a sudden there was one season, and just like that, it seemed like every game he threw a pick six. Didn't he have like 7 consecutive games or something?
It was a very long streak. They went from 12-4 to 2-14, like back-to-back seasons.
Yeah, and it was just all Matt Schaub dying. I don't know what it was.
So we'll go to receivers next. Or do you no? We should go fullback now. Fullback. This one is strictly Madden. Like
he was a pretty good player.
Right, but I don't remember. Like I don't really.
You would never watch. Spoiler alert: he's a Raiders player. You never watch a Raiders game, and you wouldn't watch him at all.
He definitely there were games where he made plays, but not in games
Sure.
I remember. Not in games I remember at least. Marcel Reese.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I feel like he's the greatest fullback of all time. Like it's definitely not the case, but I feel like he just is because I remember in Madden, you just put him in fullback dive every time. You could put him at tight end. He'd be like an 85.
That's what I always did. He was like a 95 overall fullback or something, and then you could put him at tight end, and he has like, I don't know, like 87 speed, and then you'd run like PA tight end flag or something or whatever it is, and he runs like a corner route, and he's just wide open every play. I did like a Raiders franchise, and I like had 2,000 receiving yards with Marcel Reese, and he instantly became my favorite fullback.
He is, yeah.
Just
He's.
like
I remember his fullback wheels were insane.
Yeah. One other person that I wanted to throw into the ring for this is Vontae Leach, former Raven. Probably the scariest human I've ever seen on TV. That guy looks like he could eat you, and it's really scary. Not gonna lie. He was a freak. Blocking for Ray Rice, I always remember like half of Ray Rice highlights were like Vontae Leach highlights, where he just absolutely blow up a linebacker, and it was very fun to watch.
Wasn't there a saying in Baltimore where it was like Ray Rice and Vontae Leach going to the beach or something like that?
I don't know. They had a lot of stupid sayings. It was like there's like hey diddle diddle Ray Rice up the middle.
Oh, okay.
And every single time Vontae Leach touched the ball, the entire crowd would go Leach, and yeah, he was a beast.
We'll go to receivers next. James Jones, if you don't remember him, Packers. Went Packers, Raiders, Packers.
Shout out people in Wisconsin who are Packers fans, because I like Wisconsin. There you go.
Hey, go Badgers, right?
Let's go.
Go. I think they're winning the Big Ten next year. I have some insider.
Yeah.
But that being said, so James Jones, I think 1 year we talked about this earlier. He had a 14 touchdown season with the Packers. Then went to the Raiders, was okay. And then when he was on the Raiders, there was a play where he fumbled twice on one play. Fumbled, like falling out of bounds, ran back in the field, recovered it, and then ran to the end zone and fumbled again, and then lost.
I did not remember this play, but you just told me about it before we started recording, and I watched it, and it goes from like a really good like sideline catch, and then he fumbles, runs, like goes out of bounds, comes back in, picks up the ball, gains like 25 more yards, and then gets the ball punched out at like the 5-yard line. So it goes from an amazing play to a horrible play to like the greatest play ever to then another terrible play. And it was just a roller coaster of emotions.
If you haven't seen it, I would recommend just looking like James Jones like double
fumble. Yeah.
It's an entertaining.
Yeah. Either way though, he always found a way to just be amazing with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I feel like when I was younger, I feel like the Packers were always on America's Game of the Week. Like it was always it was Cowboys. That's all it was, or Cowboys versus Giants. And I remember
that still happens.
Yeah, it's literally
there's a Cowboys.
And I just remember kind of being like, this guy, like it was him and Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley, I think, were there.
Then there was Jordy Nelson too.
Jordy Nelson, I forgot that was a great team. A lot of weapons, but yeah, I just remember him standing out for whatever reason. I think the 14 touchdown season helped a lot.
Yeah, we were looking at his stats before we started recording. He didn't top he topped 800 yards twice, and he didn't top 850 yards until his final season where he had like 890.
Yeah.
Like he was just somehow like he just found a way to score touchdowns, which was crazy. And just had the best chemistry ever with Rodgers, which was very cool to watch.
Next, small, I believe he was undrafted, maybe a 7th round pick. Small white guy out of Texas Tech. Cliff Kingsbury described him as like a frat boy, like a frat guy, just showing up to the team. Wes Welker, I believe he wasn't drafted. I'm pretty sure he was. Obviously known for the Patriots. He did play with obviously the Broncos towards the end of his career, and then I think with the Rams for maybe a season. And then before that with the Dolphins and the Chargers. But I think most people probably remember him from his Patriots days.
Yeah.
We both obviously hate the Patriots, so the fact that he's on this list is a credit to him. I mean, he was kind of like the poster of like hard work pays off because tiny. I mean, he's a fast guy, but he's like tiny and just kind of. I think every like kid growing up who was like undersized like saw him and was like, I could be him pretty much.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like when I would played receiver because I used to play receiver and I was like really short. I was kind of like, yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah, he was very lethal from like the 0 to like 8 yard range with the Patriots. I remember like it was always. It's basically, I think he's like a better version of what Julian Edelman is now. And he doesn't seem like a asshole. I hate Julian Edelman.
He had a couple. He has, I think, the record for consecutive 100-yard catch seasons. I could be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure he does because I know a couple
like 100 catches in a season.
Yes, 100 catches in the season. I think he has the record for consecutive amount of times doing that. I think it's 3. I could be wrong. So hey, he was incredible. I don't want to like just because he was undersized. He was actually a very, very good receiver.
Yep.
As well. Even with the Broncos, he was very good too.
Yeah. With Peyton Manning, he was really good.
Yeah. With Eric Decker and Demaryius Thomas, that was another really good team. Next, this is a fan favorite, upstate New York favorite. And again, this is another team or another player who you could say is part of the face of the drought, probably less so, but still up there. And if the people watching this in Wisconsin probably don't know this guy's name is Stevie Johnson. Why So Serious?
He's in the intro.
He is in
all the YouTube watchers. He is in the intro, and he is the reason there's the "Why So Serious" quote in the intro. Yes. He was always a good player. I would never say he was great, but it was more his personality that made him so like polarizing, I guess. But at the same time, he was on the Bills, so he was only polarizing for Bills fans. So he's kind of like our own like celebrity in upstate New York that only he cared about.
Yeah, he also played for the Chargers. He played for the Chargers and the Niners his last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Didn't play much, but I remember him, Stevie Johnson, obviously just for his celebrations were insane, but I remember he had a 10 touchdown season. The same year, Ryan Fitzpatrick had a 23 touchdown, 10 pick season, and I was like, even if they went 4-12, they're the greatest offense to ever exist.
And then, like, he had a 1,000-yard season. He got to 1,000 yards by, like, 10 yards or something, if I remember correctly. And, like, that was, like, the buzz around town that Stevie Johnson is amazing because he got to 1,000 yards. And nowadays, it's, like, irrelevant if you do that.
Yeah, I remember John Brown had, I want to say, almost 1,200 yards this season. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, years ago, like, Stevie Johnson had 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, and that was like the Bills' Super Bowl almost.
Yeah.
He also might have the best stats against Darrelle Revis, maybe outside of Randy Moss, like ever. Like he made Darrelle Revis not look bad because Darrelle Revis is insane, but he made him look human for sure.
Yeah. Other Stevie Johnson stories. There was the game-winning touchdown that he dropped against the Steelers that I remember. And then in the post-game press conference, they're like, "Oh, Stevie, what was going through your head on this play? Like you gotta like be like thinking about this play a lot or whatever." And he said something along the lines of, "God told me to drop it." And I think that's all you need to know about Stevie Johnson.
He tweeted it afterwards. I still follow him on Instagram.
Oh, maybe it was a tweet. Yeah, my bad.
He's a very good follower on Twitter.
I think I still follow him too.
Next.
One other thing I wanted to say.
Talk about him all day.
Fred Jackson and Stevie Johnson, obviously, like we said, they were kind of the face of the Bills during their drought. All you need to know about their character, I was probably 10, 11, 12, and I went to a couple of my friends, like my dad and stuff. We went to, it was like a car dealership or something, and they were having Fred Jackson and Stevie Johnson come and signing on autographs. Oh, Dash is barking.
Yeah, I remember going to Bills training camp
Yeah.
to get
And it was just them, and they were coming. And Fred Jackson was there like 2 hours early signing stuff, and Stevie Johnson just never showed up. So it was only Fred Jackson, and I think that's all you need to know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I remember after Fred Jackson got cut, it might have been the saddest day like in a very long time.
Yeah.
Especially because they made the playoffs. They made the playoffs like the next year.
Yeah.
And he never made the play. I don't know why I mentioned that. He made the play. First off, he made the playoffs with the Seahawks, I think. So he at least got there.
And I don't know if people know this. I am a Ravens fan, and when I first started liking football, I was a Bills fan, and it was like 4th grade when I became a Ravens fan. So and I've always liked the Bills as well. Like I'll always root for them pretty much unless they're playing the Ravens.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of love for the Bills.
Yeah. Stevie Johnson, Fred Jackson are easily top 5 of my favorite players of all time.
For completely different reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Next, Tim, I know this is more your guy because he played for the Ravens, but also was a superstar with Kurt Warner for a couple years, and that's Anquan Boldin. I think his first career game, he had over 200 yards.
Yeah, and then he got traded to the Ravens pretty early in his career. But Anquan Boldin, these next 2 guys we're going to be talking about are Ravens. But these next 2 guys are pretty much the reason Joe Flacco had his playoff run. Anquan Boldin, I've never been more confident in a receiver that they're going to just moss somebody like on the sideline or just win a jump ball in my entire life. At least for like games that I'm like really rooting for a team. Like it was like, oh, Joe Flacco's throwing it up to Anquan Boldin. I wonder who's going to catch this one. And it's just Anquan Boldin mossing somebody and like stiff arming someone. He was pretty sure he was a quarterback in college at like Florida State, and he like was converting to receiver, and he ran like a 4.8 at the combine or something, and like he wasn't supposed to be good at all, and I don't know what it was, dude. He was just so consistently good, and a huge reason the Ravens won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like Anquan Boldin.
I also like him a lot, but what I'm going to say right now probably makes you think I don't. I actually do love him a lot. I think he's a very good player. He retired on the Bills in a preseason game, so there's that.
Yeah.
Not in a game. I don't think it was in a game. I think it was in the
middle. He was like on the team during the preseason.
Yes, he retired, and then he asked for a trade after he was retired. It is what it is. Next, Dennis Pitta. Again, I know that's your guy, Tim. I'll let you talk about him for a bit.
He was pretty much Joe Flacco's safety blanket until his hip exploded like 27 times, which is really unfortunate because he was really, really good. Him and Anquan Boldin during that Super Bowl run were like the most important players on the offense. And then there was like Torrey Smith every once in a while would have like – he destroyed Champ Bailey in the first half of the Broncos game in the divisional round. And then there was obviously the Jacoby Jones miracle Hail Mary. But yeah, Dennis Pitta was so good at just finding like soft spots and zones to sit down and just be wide open for Joe Flacco. I don't know what it was, but like whenever he caught the ball, there was just no one around him. And I don't know what, he was just amazing for reasons I can't explain. I don't know. I love that dude.
Another tight end I wanted to throw in, which we didn't write down, but another tight end I wanted to throw in, strictly because of Madden and fantasy football, was Chris Cooley, who played for Washington for a while. I don't know if you guys remember the fantasy football, like it was like the store, like fantasy football commercials where like players would show off like their skills. Mm-hmm. Chris Cooley had one where he like put his hands through a brick wall and caught a ball.
It was in like a house being built or something, if I remember correctly, and he like punches through like a wooden door and catches the football. Like I don't know what they was like proving. He was like, draft me, and then it was like Ben Jarvis Green Ellis jumping through a car, like a moving car. There's other like random things. It was like Mason Crosby like kicking at like a bell tower. I don't know what anything was.
I think
I don't know.
I think
I don't know what was happening.
T.O. caught 3 balls. Where he like
Oh
caught
yeah,
one.
he had like 2 one-hand catches and he caught one in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Chris Cooley, I think in like Madden 12, he was just like, if I ever did a fantasy draft, he always fell in the draft for some reason. So I was like, I get like an 85 tight end in like the 20th round. Of course, I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw his name in the round. So next we have offensive linemen. We kind of just we didn't say like 2 guards, 2 tackles in the center. We just kind of picked a bunch of guys we remember or we
Yeah.
I don't want to yeah, it's kind of
And
most
then
of the
obviously in our childhood, we're not paying as close attention as we are now. So it's kind of hard to think of offensive linemen we loved when we were younger.
Yeah.
So a lot of these are just going to end up being Bills and Ravens players, but we just got to take it as it is.
So first, number one, who's actually still in the league and is a controversial figure to say the least. It was actually
yeah.
had 2. Believe it or not, he's had 2 hiatuses from the NFL. So Richie Incognito, obviously, played for the Dolphins and the Rams, was a Pro Bowler. Then the whole what's the guy's name? Something Martin. Jonathan Martin, right?
Yeah.
Jonathan Martin.
I think that's right.
I think if we're not, you can just look up the billing scandal. But so he was, I don't know if he was suspended for a year or he just was blackballed by the league, didn't play for a year. And then the Bills signed him, Rex Ryan signed him, and he was a Pro Bowler again, probably one of the best linemen on that team. And then after the Bills, he left the Bills. He like went on like this crazy thing on Twitter where he was like yelling at Mike Zimmer, and then his dad passed away, and he like threatened to cut his deceased father's head off, and again didn't play for like another year. And then John Gruden's like, hey, that's my guy. I'm going to sign him. And he signed him. And he seems to be doing very well. I follow him on Twitter. Very good follower for Twitter. Like, honestly, he's a very entertaining person, as you might imagine. And I remember during Hard Knocks with the Raiders, I remember him and Antonio Brown were always just, like, messing around with each other. So he's probably just for the Bills time. But I think just all around was crazy.
He was definitely an attention grabber. Let's just say that. Which is hard to do as an offensive lineman, but there you go. Another name that I'd throw out, Joe Thomas is like one of the best offensive linemen of all time. Former Badger, which obviously I love a lot. It takes a lot for me to throw a Brown on this list, but he's kind of like the face of underappreciated NFL players, not only because he's an offensive lineman, but because the entire time he was on the Browns, they were absolutely horrible. But I think he deserves to at least get a shout out on this list for what he's done as a player, being an absolute dominant, rock solid piece on the Browns offensive line for like 15 years or however long he played. Other guys that I'd want to mention are some Ravens. Back to the Super Bowl run. Their 2 offensive tackles were Bryant McKinney, who probably like 0.1% of the population knows about. He was absolutely horrible, and then they like threw him in the starting lineup, and he went on like a 8-game stretch of being amazing, and then sucked after that. And Michael Orr were the 2 tackles during that run, and obviously he has the blindside story. So that combined with being on the Ravens made me really interested in Michael Orr when I was a kid.
Yeah. I
don't know who you have next.
So next. So Jeff Saturday was probably like he was the Colts center for a very long time. Playing with Peyton Manning, but I think for whatever reason, whenever I thought of centers, not centers, just pretty much offensive linemen, I either thought of him or Nick Mangold for the Jets, who was an All-Pro, I believe, for a very long time until he retired. But the 2 of them, I always just kind of like I looked at and I was like, I never met them, never even heard anything about them. Now that Jeff Saturday is now on NFL Network, I want to say. But I both was like, those are good guys. Like, those are good people. I didn't know why. But
Nick Mangold was always like, you do a fantasy draft on Madden 12, and he'd be like the 99 overall center that's always staring there. Like, you're never gonna pick.
Yeah, exactly. We shouted out to Ferguson, of course, another Jet guy. Great name, also a great player. He was very good for a very long time.
Yeah, D'Brickashaw Ferguson pretty much is on this list because of his name, and that just has always stuck out to us because, wow. But he was actually a pretty good player, from what I remember, at least.
Yeah, I know he always had a very good rating in Madden. So there's that, and that's kind of how I gauged how good players were back when I was like.
Right. Yeah, because you didn't really know what you were looking for, and then some random guy who like supposedly knows about football is giving him a high rating, so you think he's good.
Exactly. Yeah.
But nowadays we definitely don't go by that.
Yeah, of course not. Because I think right now the highest. Yeah, I don't even think Bobby Wagner. I think Bobby Wagner's rating went from a 99 to like a 97, and he was like having an extraordinarily good season. So Madden, don't listen to it. But also the Key and Peele skit where obviously they're doing like the crazy names or whatever, and then like the last one they do was just like D'Brickashaw Ferguson. Don't even change his name.
Yeah.
And then one last guy I had is again a Bills guy. Gotta shout him out. Another guy who low key. He was in the drought for a couple years. He ended up making the playoffs. Thank God, he was there for the playoffs. Right? Yeah, he made the play. He made the playoffs with the Bills. His last season, Eric Wood. Or no, it wasn't his last season. I don't know. He did make the playoffs at one point. Eric Wood, signed for the Bills for I think it was like eight or 9 years. Again, an incredibly great guy. He's actually a broadcaster now for the ACC network. He went to Louisville. A pretty entertaining guy as well on broadcast, but yeah, he was always.
Yeah, he's like one of those guys that all Bills fans loved, not necessarily because like they knew he was a really good player, but they thought he was even better just because he was always like a really good guy in and out the community.
Yeah, that's for sure. He also, I think he made a couple Pro Bowls, I want to say. So I remember like the Bills during the drought years, they would have 0 Pro Bowlers, and they'd be Eric Ward or Kyle Williams that made the Pro Bowl. It'd never be both of them, just be one of them. I don't know if there's anyone else for offense that you wanted to shout out real quick.
That's pretty much it in terms of people who should be on this list. One person that just popped into my head when we were talking about this before, 100% does not deserve to be on this list, is out of players that have been on my favorite teams in sports, he's probably my least favorite player of all time. And I don't even know if he's like a good guy or a bad guy. I have no idea what it is. But I've never been more mad on an offensive lineman in my entire life is when it was the year after the Ravens won the Super Bowl. It was the year they went like 8-8. And they probably lost 2 games because of their center, Gino Gradkowski. And this is just giving me a platform to vent about a player that probably no one listening to this show knows about. Actually, shout out Scott Collier, who was on this podcast before. He knows my hatred for Gino Gradkowski. We laugh about it all the time. There was one game. It was against the Browns, and they lost to the Jason Campbell-led Browns. And Gino Gradkowski he had like it was like 2 false starts as a center, or like he wouldn't snap the ball and everyone else would go. And then it was consecutive plays where he did that, had holding, and so they lost like 10 yards because of it. And then I see him the very next play get absolutely bulldozed by a blitzing linebacker for a sack on Joe Flacco. And it was on like the game like tying drive where they needed to go kick a field goal, and they're at like the 50-yard line, and they end up losing like 35 yards just solely because of Gino Gradkowski. And he was absolutely horrible. So no one probably cares about that rant, but as a kid, I've never been more mad at a single player in my entire life. So there's my spiel on Gino Gradkowski.
Yeah, Gino Gradkowski's kids are our biggest fans in the world, and you just ruin their perception.
If you're watching Gino Gradkowski's kids right now, I'm talking to you. I hate your dad with a burning passion, and I'm sorry about it.
Hey, he's probably a good guy.
Pretty sure he's the brother of Bruce Gradkowski.
Bruce Gradkowski's Twitter is it's a thing. It exists.
This is true.
I don't know if you see it. I'm not a big fan of the guy. It was as a player, but one last thing I want to throw in real quick before we head out. A Richie Incognito story I have that I don't know why I didn't think of this when I heard of it, or when we brought him up. But I met Richie Incognito. I was in Pittsford Village, which is basically east side of Rochester, New York. I was going to Starbucks, meeting someone at Starbucks, and Richie Incognito and his trainer was like the size of me. Mind you, I was like 14 probably at the time when I was scrawny, like very small kid. And he was about the size of me, and Richie Incognito was at least double the size of him. It had like arm sleeves, and I was so scared to like say anything to him. And my mom was like, "You had like he plays for the Bills," and I was like, "Yeah." And my mom was like, "You have to go talk to him. You're gonna regret it if you don't." So I like went up to him, and I was like, "Hi," and he was just like, "Oh, hey, kid," and like that was it. But the random story I had, but there we go.
Well, there you go. All right, so that's all we have for today. Make sure to get those mailbag questions in for sure, because we probably can't make a full mailbag episode until enough people send in questions. But either send it on Twitter, Instagram, comment on the YouTube channel,
Text us
any way you can to contact us, for sure.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.
See you guys. Thanks.
Love you guys.